"Mom, you can't leave your dad. He won't survive the divorce. If you do, we'll stop talking to you," my two daughters told me when I told them I was leaving my husband. "What do you mean? You've fallen in love. You can't do that to your dad. He's perfect," they said. A few months earlier, I had actually met the perfect man. I didn't bother telling them that their dad wasn't who he seemed. I knew 7 of his mistresses. I just guessed about for more. I fucked him with 2 women twice and in my own bedroom. Seriously? Do you think I don't deserve happiness? The kids are grown. Nothing has been holding us back for a long time. And I took a step into the unknown. They never forgave me for that. I'm Chris, 65, New York born and bred, a woman who can thread a needle on a moving subway and hold her tongue only when the thread is in my mouth. I married at 20 because he had a smile like summer and I had a suitcase full of hope. By 21, I was pregnant. I dropped out of college the same week my morning sickness announced itself like a brass band. There wasn't anyone to help with the children, no mother who could fly in and save the day, no sister to tag in for bedtime. It was me, my babies, and a man who swore he'd be home by 6 and usually strolled in at 10 smelling like other people's perfume. We lived in Queens in a railroad flat with windows that rattled in winter and a view of the brick wall across the alley. I learned the city by the price of milk and the timing of buses. By 23, I was working days and nights at a bridal salon in Midtown, fingers raw from satin and tulle. I sewed other women's dreams into those dresses, thousands of tiny pearls, invisible zippers, sleeves that lay smooth as promises, and every day I regretted the day I'd said I do. Irony is a dress with a bustle. It always follows you, lifting itself up at the worst moment. He cheated. Of course he did. At first it was rumors, the sideways look from a neighbor, the cashier who went quiet when I walked into the bodega. Then it became proof so bright it squeaked. The first time I caught him, I came home early from a 3-day girls' trip that was actually me in a motel 2 exits up the parkway, crying into a vending machine Snickers while my friend Angela watched the kids. I unlocked our apartment, stepped into our bedroom, and found him there, our bed dented like an apology, a woman's sandal on the rug, his mouth forming a story so fast it tripped over itself. He bought me a ring the next day, rose gold with a little Marquise diamond that looked like an eye. "Forgive me," he said. The ring did the apologizing for him, round and shiny and designed to distract. I wore it because the girls were small and I wanted a man at the dinner table who could teach them how to ride a bike without training wheels. The second time was worse because it was ordinary. I was bringing him soup at his office. He'd texted he wasn't feeling well. I saw him across the street, laughing into the wind with a woman whose scarf matched his tie, like they'd coordinated outfits and alibis. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding so hard the sidewalk felt it. They ducked into a wine bar. He saw me in the window and did that slow blink men do when they're calculating the cost of a lie. The next day he gave me another ring. "An anniversary gift," he said, though it wasn't our anniversary. This one had a halo of diamonds. I called it Saturn. I wore it like a tally mark. I kept count because there's power in knowing the size of your problem. 7 I could name, 4 I suspected. 11 rings in all, each one a numbered apology, each one arriving in a velvet box with words tucked under the lid. "She means nothing. You know you're my only. I'm just stressed. You're imagining things." I wasn't. But imagination kept dinner on the table and the girls in ballet flats, so I pretended. When the girls were teenagers, I stayed because I wanted him to be a stepfather, his word, not mine, to the parts of them I couldn't reach. He was good at soccer practices and bad at honesty. Later, when the girls left for college and my bank account looked as thin as a hem, I stayed because fear is a spectacular seamstress. It can stitch you into a life so tight you forget you're allowed to breathe. At the salon, brides floated in on clouds of Instagram and left in gowns I'd built with invisible labor. I learned every shade of white: diamond, ivory, candlelight, bone. The salesgirls called me the magician because I could shape a bodice to smooth a heartbreak and anchor a train so it didn't trip a woman who wanted to run. I smiled and pinned and kept my stories to myself. But sometimes when I was alone at the pressing table and the steam made halos in the air, I'd talk to the dresses. "Don't you dare," I'd tell the seams. "Don't you dare split on her." To the brides, I said nothing. To myself, I said, "You will not die in this dress you never wanted." Everything changed the day I ran out of gas on the way to my mother's in a neighboring town, one of those quick visits that already felt like a marathon. I pulled into a station with a neon sign and a cracked air pump. He was there, 2 pumps over, sleeves rolled, hair gone salt and pepper in a way that made honesty look possible. He had a pickup that had seen seasons and a kindness that didn't ask for applause. "You alright?" he said, like we'd met before in some other life where I'd chosen differently. "Depends what you mean by alright," I answered. "New Yorkers don't hand out their vulnerability before noon." He laughed. "I'm Sam," he said, offering a hand that was warm and calloused. He paid for my gas before I could argue and wiped a streak of something hope, maybe from my windshield with a rag that had once been a t-shirt. We exchanged numbers because it felt less like a decision and more like gravity doing its job. When his first text came 2 hours later, a picture of the sky striped with gulls and the words, "Saw this and thought of you. Looks like freedom." I sat in my parked car and let the world tilt. I didn't believe my heart could still recognize the word freedom, let alone answer to it. But it did. It thudded in my chest like a teenager late for curfew. We met in secret for months. Coffee that turned into walks. Walks that turned into late afternoon conversations where time slipped its watch off and forgot to count. I told him about thread counts and thimbles, about the way brides cry for 3 reasons: terror, joy, or the sudden realization that their mother is inside their mouth. He told me about houses he'd renovated, porches he'd rebuilt so old men could sit with their newspapers and be kings again. He was gentle with my cynicism, patient with my gallows humor, and never once tried to tidy my past like a spill on his workbench. The night he asked me to leave my husband, we were sitting on a bench under a sickle moon. "Chris," he said, my name sounding like a decision in his mouth, "I want to marry you, not some idea of you. You." He took out a ring not flashy, not penitential, just a simple band with a small emerald tucked in like a secret. "Divorce him and marry me." I didn't say yes right away. I took the long way around my own fear. I measured it, pinned it, basted it, pressed it with steam until the fabric of my life lay flat enough to cut. Then I said yes. My daughters called me a traitor. They said I was breaking their father in half. They threatened silence and delivered it. Their judgment came like weather, loud, relentless, unpredictable. I stood under it and got wet. Then I got a coat. The divorce was a parade of paperwork and performative sorrow. He tried every dirty trick he'd learned from a lifetime of easy apologies. He cried in court. He sent me flowers. He wrote letters that were equal parts Shakespeare and used car salesman. I kept my head down and my hands busy. The judge split what could be split and told us to go be strangers. I married Sam in a small ceremony by the river where the wind tugged at my veil and a gull circled like it had a speech to give. I wore a dress I'd made myself, a bias-cut silk that knew what to do with a woman who'd finally decided to be the bride she could live with. Sam cried when he saw me, honest tears that didn't demand I fix them. We were both 60 by then, past the age of pretending, and brave enough to say it out loud. The next 5 years were what I'd wanted when I was 20 and didn't even know the vocabulary for it. A life that felt like mine. Sam's house was a kind of luxury I didn't advertise: quiet rooms, tall windows, the hum of a good refrigerator, old wood that sang when you walked on it. He'd done well. I didn't ask how well. He told me anyway, not with numbers but with behavior. Generosity that wasn't ostentatious. A pantry that was always full. A thermostat set to the temperature of kindness. He gave me a studio off the kitchen with a long table where I could cut fabric without pushing aside cereal bowls. He made me coffee every morning and warm milk with nutmeg at night, and somewhere in between we built a daily life that fit like it had been tailored. There was only one rule. Don't go into the back room at the end of the hall, he said it once, the way you tell someone not to touch a painting because the oils in their fingers could change it. I didn't press. Everyone deserves a locked door. Grief has rooms that shouldn't be photographed. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear him in his study turning pages. He kept a leather notebook there, wrote in it like a man bailing water from a boat, steady, necessary, focused on not sinking. I asked once who the notebook was for. Posterity, he said with a small smile. Or maybe just my own stubborn heart. I kissed him and went back to my studio, humming as I stitched, letting mysteries remain decorative, not structural. And then Sam died. It was the soft kind of dying a heart that decided one sunrise was enough. I found him in his chair in the study, coffee cooling on the table, sunlight pooling on his hands. The house went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator thinking about it. I handled the phone calls with the same precision I used on French seams. I told the crematorium I'd be in touch. I told his lawyer to call me when the paperwork had a place to land. I told his absence to sit down and stop pacing. It didn't. 3 days after the memorial, I went into his study to gather the projects he'd left mid-sentence. On the desk, I found a heavy brass key I hadn't seen before, tucked under his notebook like a punctuation mark. Not a period, more like a colon, promising something to come. The key had a scar down its shaft, an old wound polished by years of use. I knew what door it fit as surely as I knew where he kept the nutmeg. I stood in the hall holding that key, the house holding its breath with me. Grief makes you superstitious. You start believing in the moral character of doorknobs. I told myself there was no reason to open that room. I told myself the dead deserved their privacy. Then I told myself the truth. He was gone, and the future had questions stamped all over it like labels on moving boxes. I turned the key. The door sighed open like a secret relieved to be told. What I saw made the world tilt. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall, photographs. A woman's face repeated in 1,000 variations, laughing and smiling, windswept at a pier, squinting into sun, eyes closed in sleep. Newspaper clippings pinned in precise rows, headlines marching like a grim parade. Local woman found dead, killer still at large, community mourns beloved teacher. In the center, a map with red string lacing the city into a web only one person could read. On the desk beneath the map lay a stack of keys labeled with dates, each tag a small gravestone. And everywhere her, Sam's first wife, dead 20 years. And God help me, she looked like me, not just similar. A near mirror, the same strong jaw, the dark eyes that could take a room's measure in a blink, the smile that didn't apologize for existing. I was staring at a version of myself who never got to grow old. I had never fainted in my life. I almost did then. I reached for the leather diary on the desk, the one he'd been writing in at night. The first page began, "My Ruth," and then a river of words poured forth memories, theories, dates, and then, strangest of all, my own sentences. Lines I'd said over breakfast, jokes I'd cracked in the car, petty complaints about the price of strawberries. He'd recorded me not as Chris, not really, but as a conversation with the dead. He was writing to Ruth in my voice, stitching me into a correspondence I hadn't consented to. Something in me buckled and then hardened. Love can be a house with rooms you never enter until the floorboards give. I closed the diary carefully, like gentleness couldn't do the contents. It couldn't. I went downstairs and called the crematorium. "I'll come by for the ashes next week," I lied, because anger is a kind of postponement. I set the phone down and looked at my hands, the same hands that had made a wedding dress for myself, the same hands that could ease a seam into behaving. The same hands that now had to decide whether the last 5 years were real. A week later, the lawyer called. Sam had left me everything. The house, the studio, the accounts with all those zeros that make bankers stand a little straighter. "He adored you," the lawyer said gently. "He wanted you to be safe." I thanked him like a woman in a play. Safety felt like a word in a foreign language I could pronounce but not understand. When my daughters found out, because money has a way of sending out invitations, they turned up at the door in coats that could have paid my rent back in Queens. The same mouths that had told me I was killing their father now shaped themselves around the word mom like it was a key to a vault. They hadn't asked about my life in 5 years. Suddenly they were interested in my health, my plans, whether I felt lonely in such a big house. I made tea. I wore all 11 of their father's apology rings and let them clink against the porcelain like bells that toll only for the truth. But that reckoning, oh, that deserves its own spotlight. First, there's a photograph I can't unsee and a room full of maps that point to a story I didn't know I was living inside. Before I decide what to do with ashes or daughters or diamonds that never bought real forgiveness, I have to answer the question that swallowed the hallway whole the day I opened that door. Who was I to Sam, a woman he loved, or a shadow he could speak through to get to his ghost? And if the answer is both, what does a woman do with a love that was true in the mouth and borrowed in the heart? I set the tea tray down like a dealer lays cards, and my daughters sat opposite me, their knees tight together, hands folded in their laps the way I'd taught them back when neatness was our only defense. It's a strange thing to be outnumbered by the people you created. They looked like me, like their father, like a genetic Venn diagram proving that biology is useful but not decisive. So, the elder began, smoothing her skirt. "We were shocked to hear about Sam's estate." Shocked, the younger echoed, like she'd been practicing in the Uber. "I'm shocked too," I said, "at how you learned about it so fast. Did the will hitchhike to your feed?" They smiled like diplomats. We are a family of practiced teeth. I poured tea and let my 11 apology rings clatter against the china. If you've never heard the sound of that many bad decisions in one place, imagine a tiny chandelier being shaken by a small, determined earthquake. Milk? I asked. Sugar? Whole life advice? We're just concerned, the elder said. You, alone in a large house. Grief can make you impulsive. I've been impulsive, I said. It's how you were born. They didn't laugh. I sipped. The afternoon light made a map of my hands, the rivers of veins, the little nicks and scars of a seamstress's wars. My girls used to hold those hands like anchors. Now they watch them like tellers watch a customer fill out a withdrawal. Their eyes took inventory vases, paintings, the old Japanese tansa chest Sem loved. I recognized that gaze. I used to use it in thrift stores. Mom, the younger said, voice softening, we don't want you to make mistakes. I've already made them, I said. I married your father. Then I stayed. Don't worry. I'm all caught up. The elder reached across the table. She has my hands, only unscarred. We could help you manage things, she said. Take care of the paperwork, the accounts. There it was, the word help dressed as a wolf. I appreciate the offer, I said. But I'm not auditioning for assisted living. I can carry my own keys. Something like relief moved across their faces, relief at being told no so they could graduate to righteous indignation. I know that rush. I lived on it for years. You owe us, the younger said, so quietly I might have missed it if my hearing weren't sharpened by decades of whispered fittings. For what you did to Dad, I owe you my honesty, I said, and I've paid in full. I stood, gathered the cups, let the steam rise between us like fog. You disowned me, I said. Not cruelly, simply naming it. You sent silence to live with me. Now you've driven out to meet my money. I don't blame you. Money has charisma. I smiled, but it's not contagious. They left with their backs straight and their opinions heavier than their handbags. On the porch, the elder turned. You're not the hero you think you are. I wanted to tell her I don't think that. I merely decided not to be my own villain. But some lessons take their time. They drove off, and the road stitched itself quiet. After they were gone, the house felt like a theater after curtain. The velvet hush, the scent of effort, the sense that something had happened and no one knew what to do with the props. I walked back down the hall to the room that had split me into before and after. I pushed the door open and stood in the threshold, not entering, like I was a museum guard checking the distance between my life and its exhibits. On the central wall, Ruth's face watched me with the calm of the photographed. It is a peculiar violence to be replaced by a ghost who looks like you. You can't compete and you can't forgive. You're just framed. I took a breath, crossed in, and set to work the way I always do when the heart has too much electricity. I tittied. I stacked the clippings by date, aligned the pushpins, straightened the red threads. A story emerged, a lattice with years for rungs. Ruth dies, no suspect. Sam grieves, no outlet. He reads, calls, visits, files, hires, begs, charts, prays. The city does what cities do, forgets. He does what the obsessed do, can't. At the desk, I found a second notebook tucked under the first, a steno pad, spiral at the top, flip style, the kind reporters used when we still respected newspapers like they were churches. The cover had been rubbed silky by thumbs. Inside, lists, names of cops on the case, with phone numbers turned into hieroglyphics by time, addresses of men who had known Ruth, colleagues, neighbors, the waiter who'd flirted harmlessly at the diner on 83rd. A column labeled keys, with descriptions that made my neck prickle. Locker at 36 CT. Gym, found empty 2007. Gate key to Ruth's classroom. Hashtag 12. Duplicate of our first apartment. Someone returned by mail. No note. Each entry had a code in red. K1, K2, K3. I pulled the little drawer that hid underneath the desk's writing surface. Inside, a shallow tray with velvet slots, each slot labeled with those red codes. The row was full, K1 through K21. I lifted them one by one. K7 had teeth like a skyline. K14 was small and brass and familiar. K21 was newly cut, a sharpness you can smell. There are moments you can feel your life computing something before your brain catches up. It's like when you're pinning a bias seam and you know, by the tug on the silk, that you've aligned it wrong. I held K14 and heard, not sound, but the memory of a morning 21 years ago. Your father had lost his keys and turned our bedroom upside down. He'd been frantic, more frantic than keys deserved. I'd laughed and told him to call a locksmith. He'd gone pale. Then he found them behind the radiator, in a place you'd need small hands to reach. The girls had been small then. I flipped to the back of the pad. There, in Sam's careful, builder's handwriting, a line carved into the paper by the pressure of fury. 2 men at the memorial who never knew Ruth while she lived. ARC. NVP. Smiling like sermons. Why lie about grief? ARC. The letters sat on the page like a dare. My ex-husband's initials are ARC. The room tilted again. I set the key down and put both palms on the desk. No, I said out loud, to the wood, the air, the stupid, relentless possibility. The city is a crowded place. Some initials are shared. Coincidence is a busy aunt who shows up at all the wrong parties. I turned the page. The steno pad offered me more of Sam's narrow handwriting. ARC. At the fundraiser, too curious about where I was on the night Ruth died. Then at a community meeting a year later with a woman I can't place. Followed me to my truck. Asked about the file. Smelled like cologne and gasoline. I could hear Sam in the words. Could see him writing the way he sanded a banister, evenly, knowing one missed patch can splinter a hand. My ex loves his cologne. He has always worn more scent than truth. He also keeps a red plastic gas can in his garage like a trophy from the months we couldn't afford to let the tank fall below a quarter. You know that feeling when an invisibly mended seam catches the light and reveals itself? That was my body. A story stitched long ago had just turned inside out. I looked around the room at Ruth multiplied. Did you know him? I asked the photographs, which is ridiculous. But grief makes you believe in call and response. Did you know his cologne? The photos were silent and merciless. I took K14 downstairs to the front hall, to the old Tansa chest that Sam liked because it had more drawers than reasons. The second drawer from the top, his junk drawer, was where he kept things that had once been important and now had nowhere else to live. I pushed pens aside, lifted batteries and rubber bands, and found an old Polaroid tucked under a stack of spare cabinet pulls. 2 men at a folding table. Behind them, a banner read, "Neighbors for Safe Streets." One man was Sam, younger, with the look of someone trying to wake up an entire city by himself. The other was my ex. He was smiling like a wolf at a wedding. He wore the jacket he brought out for charm offensives. On the back, in Sam's block letters, ARC says he knew Ruth from a tenant association. Can't find him on the roster. The air went thin. Suddenly the walls of my throat had opinions. I sat on the stairs, the Polaroid between my knees, and took the kind of breath that moves furniture. People talk about shock like it's loud. It isn't. It's the quietest thing I've ever heard. Here's a complicated truth. It would be convenient to decide Sam had loved me only as a shadow puppet of his dead wife. That is a neat wound, rank with betrayal, easy to stitch shut with anger. This other thing, this possibility that Sam loved me and also stood in a room drawing lines that led toward the man I had once married, that was messy. It left me with a needle in my hand and no pattern. I put the photograph back where I found it. Then I did what I always do when overwhelmed. I made a list. 1. Pick up Sam's ashes. Stop weaponizing grief like a fork at a cocktail party. 2. Hire a locksmith to rekey the house. It's mine now. Make it mine. 3. Read every page of the steno pad and diary. No flinching. 4. Call Angela. She'll tell me the truth in a voice that swears. 5. Find Ruth's case file. If Sam carried the torch, I can carry it too. I owe him the courtesy of not quitting at the door. The crematorium lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and a secret. The clerk had the smile of someone who keeps stones in their pocket for ballast. Take your time, she said, setting the cardboard container on the counter as if it were a sleeping bird. I'd promised myself I wouldn't cry, and I didn't. I'm not brave. I'm dehydrated. On the way home, I stopped at the river. I set the ashes on the passenger seat and buckled them in. Don't get cocky, I told them. You're not shotgun. You're evidence. The river was behaving itself, an obedient sheet of blue. Sam had loved this spot. He'd once told me water forgives your shape. It just keeps being itself. I sat on the bench and talked to a man who was dust and maybe also everywhere. You wrote to Ruth with my sentences, I said. I deserved better. But so did you. So did she. So here's the deal. I'm going to finish what you started. I touched the container. Not to be your saint, to be my own. Back home, I called Angela. She has a laugh that could save a sinking ship. Well, hell, she said after I told her. RC as in RC. I never liked that man's eyebrows. His eyebrows? They were aggressive, like centipedes with an agenda. More importantly, he's always been a collector. Women, admiration, outrage, loyalty. He loves trophies. Keys are trophies, I said, thinking of the drawer. So are rings. Angela went quiet, which is how you know she's more than entertainment. She's a blade. Do you want me to come? Yes, I said, the most honest word. Bring coffee and gloves. We spent the afternoon as if we were planning a heist, which, in a way, we were stealing back my own certainty. We went through the diary page by page. Sam wrote to Ruth like a man leaving notes for a wife who'd run to the store and got lost 20 years ago. Your favorite tomatoes are back at the farmer's market. The bench by the river needs replacing. I'll fix it Sunday. Saw a man who swore we'd never met. He pronounced my name like he'd practiced it. In the margins, occasionally, a small asterisk led to an index card taped to the back cover. Those cards were Sam's dead drops. Call Detective Holbrook retired. Staten Island Ray misplaced lab reports. Find the tenant association roster from 1998. Ask for blue binder. Ask ARC why he was at the second candlelight vigil if he missed the first. I can't explain it except to say my grief found a job and stopped knocking over furniture. I made copies. I bought a corkboard of my own. The back room, which had been a cathedral to an old sorrow, became our workspace, Angela and me and the ghost of a man with a pencil behind his ear. At dusk, after Angela left me with a casserole that could feed a sorrow or a small army, I stood in the hall with the house hushed around me and everything still ahead. I slipped K21 onto my keyring. It felt right there, like a new tooth. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. We should talk about Sam's files. We have mutual history. No name. The attached photo showed a corner of a corkboard with a single index card pinned, ARC, plus Ruth Verify, and in the edge of the frame, just visible, the corner of a driver's license. The name on it began with H. My skin lifted. It's a funny trick of biology when your body makes gooseflesh for a memory it hasn't had yet. Who is this? I wrote back, which is not the question you should ask a stranger who knows your dead husband's handwriting. A minute later, someone who believes Sam when no one else did. Meet me where the river forgives. The bench. I looked at the ashes on the mantel. Well, sweetheart, I said, either you're throwing me breadcrumbs or somebody else is throwing me off a cliff. I grabbed my coat, tucked the steno pad under my arm, and locked the front door with every key I own. The night tasted like cold pennies and maybe answers. Somewhere between the top step and the car, the memory returned in full. A scene I'd shelved because it was inconvenient. 2 summers before I met Sam. I'd come home a day early from my mother's and found my ex in our bed with a woman who wore a silver locket shaped like a book. I'd noticed because I'd made bridesmaids gifts shaped just like it that spring. The locket had fallen to the floor. I'd picked it up, returned it to the woman with a politeness that should be in a museum. Her name, I could hear him gasp it when he realized he'd been caught, was Hannah. The text driver's license, cut off at the corner, had shown Han. I got in the car and turned the key. The headlights dragged the night out of the driveway. Somewhere behind me, 11 rings rang once, soft as bells in distant fog. I drove toward the river, toward the bench that knew our vows, toward a meeting that might unzip the past. If this was a trap, well, I've been trapped before. I learned something no one teaches. Even cages have hinges. I parked by the river just past 9. The headlights slicing through a thin mist that curled like cigarette smoke. The bench was still there, the same one where Sam had asked me to marry him. 2 boards missing, the paint bleached by 5 winters, and a love that had aged like good wood. No one was sitting there. The message had said, we should talk about Sam's files. The files were in the trunk, tucked inside a showbox wrapped in a towel. I'd brought them because something in me didn't trust to leave them behind. Not after that picture of the corkboard. Not after seeing the corner of a driver's license that could belong to a ghost from my marriage. The river gurgled softly in the dark, a sound that can't decide between comfort and warning. I sat on the bench, my gloved hands folded over my knees. Every small sound became a question: the crunch of gravel behind me, the sigh of water against rock, the whisper of leaves doing their gossip. Chris, said a voice behind me. I turned. It was Hannah. I knew her before the light caught her face, something about the way she moved, still half swagger, half apology. The same woman I'd found in my bed 20-something years ago, scrambling for her dress while my husband rehearsed the world's worst explanations. Time had changed her, softened her cheekbones and deepened her eyes, but she was unmistakable. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. I wasn't sure you'd be real. We looked at each other, two veterans of the same war, different sides, same scars. Can I sit? She asked. That depends, I said. Are you here to apologize or to resurrect something? She almost smiled. Neither. I'm here to make sense of Sam. That name dropped between us like a stone into water. The ripples reached everything. She sat beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral, expensive, too confident for the night. I met Sam after Ruth died, she began. He came to me for information. I was doing freelance clerical work for a private investigator back then, someone who'd looked into Ruth's case. He wanted everything: police reports, witness statements, the autopsy summary, the photos. He thought the police had missed something. I thought he was just another grieving husband trying to turn guilt into purpose. That sounds like him, I said quietly. But he was different, she went on. He didn't just ask questions. He knew things that weren't public. Like what she was wearing when she died. What song was playing at the bar where she was last seen. I frowned. How would he know that? She hesitated. He said a man told him. Someone who claimed to know Ruth before she was married. He gave only initials: Ark. The air went thin again. He told me, Hannah continued, that Ark had an alibi that never checked out. That he'd gone to a hotel that night with a woman but paid cash, no ID. The woman disappeared from the record. He was sure Ark knew more. My pulse thudded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Did Sam ever confront him? Yes, she said. And that's when I stopped hearing from Sam. What do you mean? She looked at me, eyes sharp with memory. He came to see me one last time, maybe a month before he met you. Said he'd finally spoken to Ark. That the man was smooth, manipulative, and dangerous. He thought he had proof, something Ruth had written, maybe letters, maybe photographs, but he was afraid to go to the police until he understood it all. He left with that look, half victory, half fear. I tried calling him a week later, but the number was disconnected. And then I read about his remarriage. She gave me a wry smile. To you. I stared at the river. It kept its secrets, rippling like laughter in another room. So you knew who I was, I said. Of course. He used to keep a photo of you, well, of her, I guess. When I saw your wedding announcement, I thought he'd gone mad. But then, you looked happy, so I let it go. Until I saw the obituary last month. She took something from her bag, a small envelope, yellowed and creased. He mailed this to my office years ago. Said to hold it until I heard from him again. I never did. When I saw his death notice, I figured maybe I was supposed to pass it to you. I took it. Inside was a single Polaroid. Ruth, standing on a street corner, smiling. And behind her, blurry but undeniable, was my ex-husband. He looked younger, cockier, but unmistakable. Ark with his salesman grin and that damn tan trench coat he used to think made him look like a movie star. I gripped the photo so tight the edges bit into my palm. You see it? Hannah said. Yes. My voice sounded like it had traveled a long way. There's more, she said. I didn't come just for that. There's a file in the old PI's storage locker downtown, under his name, but it's really Sam's. He paid the rent for years. When the investigator died, the company tried to reach next of kin. No one responded. I think Sam meant to collect it, but she let the sentence fall apart. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Sam's handwriting, Ark, again, same coat. 2 weeks before Ruth's death. My stomach tightened. Do you still have the key to that locker? I do, she said, but I'm not going alone. I looked up at the night, the city glittering in the distance like it had overheard us. Neither am I. We met again the next morning at a self-storage facility that smelled like dust and disuse. The clerk recognized neither name, but the key worked on Unit 217. The door rolled up with a groan that sounded alive. Inside were cardboard boxes, a filing cabinet, and a portable heater covered in cobwebs. The boxes were labeled in Sam's neat hand. Ruth, 1999 to 2004, evidence unverified, photos, candles. We set them down in the narrow corridor of light. Hannah crossed her arms, watching me with something like pity. You sure about this, Chris? Once you open this, you can't go back. I laughed, dry and bitter. Darling, going back is the one thing I've never been allowed to do. We opened the first box. Letters, dozens of them, written in a looping, feminine script. Ruth's, addressed to Sam, but most never mailed. The first line of one read, if anything happens to me, tell the truth, even if it sounds impossible. I felt a chill move through me. We read on. Ruth had been afraid of someone she'd met before Sam, someone who watched her windows and left notes in her mailbox. She called him the charming man from Queens. I didn't need the initials to know. In another envelope, tucked behind a sheaf of photographs, was a letter from Sam himself, unmailed, unsent, maybe unsayable. Ruth, it began. I think I've found him. The man who haunted you. I don't know what to do with the knowledge. I've met someone who looks like you, and she makes me want to live again. Maybe that's why I can finally face this. But if I'm right, if the man you feared is who I think he is, I don't know if she'll survive the truth. My breath caught. Hannah whispered, he meant you. Yes, I said. And the man he meant was my husband. We stood there in the dim light, surrounded by the ghosts of 3 lives knotted together like thread that had tangled beyond saving. Hannah said, if Sam was right, if your ex killed Ruth, he didn't just cheat on me. I interrupted. He killed his own past. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said what had been building since the moment I'd opened that door in Sam's house. If Sam spent his life looking for justice, I can damn well finish it. We packed the letters and photos into a single box. I'd deal with them later. For now, we took only copies: Ruth's last words, the Polaroid, and Sam's confession. Outside, the daylight looked indecent after what we'd read. Hannah lit a cigarette. You know he'll deny everything. Of course, I said. He's been rehearsing denial his whole life. She blew smoke into the air. What are you going to do? I thought about it. My mind ticked like a sewing machine. I'm going to make him tell the truth without realizing he's doing it. Her eyebrows arched. How? By doing what I do best, I said. I'll let him think I'm mending something. That evening, I called my ex-husband. His voice hadn't changed, still that smooth radio tone he'd used to charm waitresses and parole officers alike. Well, he said, if it isn't my runaway bride. Don't flatter yourself, I said. I didn't run away. I upgraded. He chuckled. You hear about Sam, I suppose? Tragic. Poor guy. Yes, I said slowly. You two knew each other, didn't you? From the neighborhood. A pause. Met him once or twice. Why? Oh, just curious. I found some old photos. You both at some kind of meeting. Thought maybe you could tell me more. The silence on the line lengthened, then cracked. Where'd you find those? In his study. I lied. He left me everything, remember? Chris, he said, voice tight now. You don't know what you're messing with. Oh, darling, I said softly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I hung up. He called back twice. I didn't answer. The next day, a bouquet of white lilies arrived at my door. No card, no signature. Just the flowers, the same kind that had been at Ruth's funeral in one of Sam's photographs. It wasn't guilt. It was a warning dressed as condolence. And I'd seen enough of both to know the difference. That night I dreamed of Sam and Ruth standing side by side, both looking at me like they were waiting for me to finish their sentence. When I woke, the river fog still clung to the window. I went to the room of photographs and stood in the middle. All right, I said out loud. You wanted justice. Let's see what that looks like when it wears lipstick. I picked up my phone and dialed Angela. Morning sugar, she said. You sound like trouble brewing. Trouble's ready to serve, I told her. I'm going to invite Ark for dinner. Lord have mercy, she said. Is it poisoned? Not yet, I said, smiling. But I do make a mean confession souffle, because sometimes to stitch up the past, you need to cut right through the fabric first. And I still had the sharpest scissors in the drawer. When I tell you I cleaned that house like a woman possessed, I mean it. Every window gleamed, every rug was brushed, every scent of grief replaced with something warm and edible: garlic, lemon, a whisper of rosemary. I wanted the place to smell like trust. Men like my ex always underestimate women who cook for them. They forget we handle knives every day. I sent the invitation by text, nothing sentimental, just, dinner at my place, Friday p.m. We have things to discuss. Come alone. He responded within a minute. I'll be there. No emoji. Just the arrogance of a man who's never imagined being cornered by a woman in her own kitchen. Angela came by that afternoon with groceries and a 6-pack of courage. You sure you want to do this? She asked, setting down a bag of lemons like it might explode. Sure, I said. No, ready? Absolutely. She eyed me. You planning to confess or confront? Neither, I said. I'm planning to perform. We spent the day prepping like it was theater. I polished the silver Sam's, heavy and unpretentious. I laid out a tablecloth the color of forgiveness white, with just enough lace to suggest innocence. On the mantel, I set a single photo, me and Sam, laughing mid-bite at a picnic, sunlight turning our hair the same shade. You want him to see that? Angela asked. Yes. I want him to know what love looks like when it isn't a transaction. She nodded slowly. You're scarier than poison. Thank you, I said. I try. He arrived at 7 sharp, because control freaks are punctual. Still handsome in that too slick way, his hair thinner now, his charm stretched tight like an old balloon. He brought a bottle of wine I'd never drink, something expensive enough to signal superiority. Chris, he said, that smirk still intact. You look prosperous. I'm hydrated, I said. Come in. He stepped over the threshold, eyes scanning the house like a thief cataloging loot. Nice place. He left you all this? Yes, I said. And a few puzzles to solve. He laughed, but it cracked around the edges. We sat at the table. I poured him a glass of wine, watched his hand tremble slightly as he lifted it. So, he said, what did you want to talk about? I smiled. Ruth. The glass froze halfway to his mouth. Sam's first wife, I said evenly. You remember her, don't you? He set the glass down. Why would I? Because you knew her, I said. You were in photographs with her. You were at her memorial. And you lied about it. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. You've been digging. Someone has to, I said. Sam spent 20 years trying to find out what happened to her. And now I'm finishing his work. He laughed on a cold, rehearsed sound. You really think you're some kind of detective? No, I said. I'm something worse. I'm an ex-wife with free time and resources. He sneered. You've lost it. Sam was obsessed. The guy couldn't let go of the past. And you, he gestured toward me, you were just his stand-in. A replacement. You think he really loved you? He loved her shadow. That's all. That one stung. I didn't flinch. Maybe, I said softly, but he treated my shadow better than you ever treated my light. The smile slid off his face. I reached for a small velvet box on the table and opened it. Inside were the rings he'd given me over the years, his apologies mounted like trophies. 11 in all, glittering in the candlelight. Remember these? I said. You could count your lies by carats. His face twisted. You're crazy. Maybe, I said, but I'm the kind of crazy that finishes what other people start. I slid a photograph across the table, the Polaroid of Ruth on the street, him in the background in that damn trench coat. Explain this. He stared at it, his mouth twitching. That's not me. Wrong, I said. I remember that coat. You wore it on our first date. You wore it when I caught you cheating. You wore it when you lied about where you were the night Ruth died. He pushed his chair back. I don't have to listen to this. You do, I said. Because I recorded this conversation. I tapped my phone on the table, its little red light blinking like a heartbeat. So either you talk, or I go to the police with the files Sam left behind. His nostrils flared. What files? Don't play dumb, I said. You've been playing that role too long. He stood abruptly. You don't know what you're talking about, Chris. Sit down, I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. He froze. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the fact that my hand was resting near the carving knife. He sat. I leaned forward. Tell me what happened to Ruth. He looked at me for a long moment, then exhaled. She was hysterical, he said finally. She called me that night, said she needed to talk. I went. She accused me of following her, said she was going to tell Sam everything. I tried to calm her down. She fell. Fell? He nodded. Off the pier. It was an accident. Did you call for help? He hesitated. She was already gone. You left her there. He didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until it ached. You let Sam spend the rest of his life searching for a murderer you could have named in one breath. He snapped. You think anyone would have believed me? It was a mistake. She slipped. I didn't push her. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I'd spent 40 years learning his every tick, every lie. This was one. I hit stop on the recording. Thank you, I said calmly. That'll do. He went pale. You can't use that. Oh, I can, I said, standing. And I will. He grabbed my wrist. Chris, listen, don't touch me, I said, jerking away. Not ever again. He stumbled back, breathing hard. You won't get away with this. I smiled. I already did. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I locked it, then sank into the chair, every nerve shaking. Angela came out from the kitchen where she'd been hiding like a well-dressed spy. Holy hell, she said. You got him. I nodded. He confessed enough. She grinned. You're going to the police? Not yet, I said. First, I'm going to let him sweat. Men like him don't sleep when they've lost control. He'll try to fix it, and that's when he'll make a mistake. Chris, she said slowly, don't play with fire. I'm not, I said. I am the fire. The next 2 days were quiet to quiet. Then came the storm. First, the anonymous calls hang-ups that breathed. Then the note slipped under my door. Stop digging or join Ruth. I showed it to Angela. She read it, snorted, and said, he's shaking. Good. But the laughter didn't last. That night, I woke to the smell of smoke. For a moment, I thought it was the fireplace, but the scent was stronger, metallic. I ran downstairs. The curtains near the back door were smoldering, a match still burning on the floor. Someone had thrown it through the mail slot. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and doused it, coughing. My hands shook, but my resolve didn't. He was scared enough to threaten me, which meant he was scared enough to run. And when cowards run, they leave evidence behind. I called Detective Holbrook the next morning, the retired one Sam had written about. His voice on the phone was gravel and suspicion. I wondered when you'd call, he said. Sam told me about you. He did? Oh, yes. Said you were the only woman he ever met who could see the seams in a lie. I swallowed hard. Then helped me finish what he started. He hesitated, then sighed. Meet me tomorrow at the diner on 83rd. Bring what you've got. When I hung up, I looked around the house, the photographs, the ashes, the remnants of 2 lives that had collided like stars. I whispered, Sam, I hope you're watching, because I'm going to burn the truth into daylight. The next morning, I dressed in Navy authorities color and packed everything into a neat folder. The recording, the Polaroid, the letter from Ruth, Sam's note, and the threatening message. As I zipped the folder, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 65. Lined, yes. Wiser, definitely. Dangerous? Absolutely. For the first time in decades, I felt like a woman who wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue her. And as I walked out the door, I didn't look back, because once you decide to expose the truth, the only direction left is forward. The diner on 83rd hadn't changed since the days when coffee cost 75 cents and hearts were broken in corner booths. The sign still flickered like it had secrets. I found Detective Holbrook in the back, stirring his tea like it had offended him. He was older than I'd expected, thick hands, kind eyes that had seen too much. Chris, he said when I slid into the booth, you look like trouble that learned to spell. I learned a few other things too, I said, laying the folder on the table between us. He opened it slowly, like a priest with a confession. The waitress poured coffee and left us to our ghosts. Holbrook sifted through the papers, Ruth's letters, the Polaroid, Sam's diary excerpt, my recording. His face didn't change much, just hardened around the jaw. When he looked up, his eyes were wet but steady. I told him to let it go, he said quietly. Told Sam he'd drown himself chasing her shadow. But he never stopped. He loved her, I said. Holbrook nodded. And you? I think he learned to love me trying to finish what he couldn't for her. That's love too, the detective said, his voice like gravel and gospel. A different kind, the living kind. He tapped the recording. You got him talking. That's gold, even if it's not a full confession. Combine it with this photo, the timeline, Ruth's letter. There's enough for the DA to reopen the case. I exhaled. After 20 years? He smiled sadly. Murder doesn't age out, sweetheart. Only witnesses do. Then we'd better move fast. He nodded, pocketed the flash drive I'd brought, and stood. You've done more than most cops. Sam would be proud. Pride wasn't what I felt. Relief wasn't either. It was something sharper, justice, maybe, or the promise of it. By the time I got home, dusk had started to crawl over the river, and my phone was vibrating like a heartbeat. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then came a text. You think you can ruin me? You'll regret this, Chris. I stared at the words, my mouth dry. Then I typed back. You already ruined yourself. I'm just sewing up the evidence. No reply. Just the silence that comes when a man realizes his tricks don't work anymore. I checked the locks, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window. The night was loud with crickets and the hum of the city. For the first time since Sam's death, I didn't feel afraid, just alert. But peace is a fragile animal. It doesn't stay unless you feed it. At midnight, I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. My stomach turned cold. I turned off the lights and watched from behind the curtain. His car, the same old navy sedan, still wearing the dents of my marriage. He stepped out, looking around like he owned the dark. He was carrying something, maybe a bag, maybe worse. I picked up the phone, ready to dial Holbrook, but something in me froze. He stood there, staring at the house that used to be ours, that was now mine. He wasn't just angry, he was unraveling. Years of lies catching up, decades of manipulation finally slipping through his fingers. I could almost pity him. Almost. Then he moved toward the door. That's when I realized what he was carrying. A red gas can. I didn't think I moved. Years of survival rewired my instincts. I ran to the back, grabbed the heavy flashlight Sam used to keep by the tool chest, and slipped out through the side door. The night air hit me like cold glass. He was on the porch, fumbling with his lighter. "Looking for this?" I said, stepping into the porch light. He froze, eyes wide. "Chris, what the hell? Put it down. I just wanted to talk." "Funny kind of talk," I said, involving kerosene. He lowered the can slowly, but his eyes darted, calculating. The same look he'd had the night I caught him cheating, the night he tried to turn my pain into his story. "You don't understand," he said. "That detective's lying. Sam set me up. He was obsessed with me, jealous of Ruth." "Stop." My voice was calm to calm. "Sam's dead. You're still lying. I think we can call that pattern established." He took a step forward. I lifted the flashlight like a weapon. "One more step," I warned, "and you'll regret it more than that hair transplant." He stopped. "You wouldn't." "Oh honey," I said, smiling. "You've never really understood what I would." Then I swung. The flashlight connected with his shoulder, not his head. "I'm angry, not homicidal." He shouted, stumbled back, dropped the lighter. I kicked it off the porch and into the grass. The gas can rolled, spilling its foul perfume across the wood. "Get off my property," I said. "Right now." He clutched his arm, eyes burning with hatred and something worse, fear. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But I'll regret it in a house that's still standing." He limped to the car, muttering curses. The taillights flared red, then vanished into the night. I stood there, heart pounding, watching the driveway swallow him. The air stank of gasoline and endings. The police came an hour later, Holbrook among them. I'd called him once I knew my hands had stopped shaking. He listened without interrupting, took the gas can as evidence, promised to put out an app. "You sure you're safe here alone?" he asked when the others left. "I've been alone before," I said, "but never this awake." He smiled faintly. "You've got grit, lady." "No," I said, "I've got practice." When he was gone, I sat by the fireplace with Sam's ashes on the mantel. "You see that?" I said. We almost had matching cremations. The urn didn't answer, but I could almost feel him there, his quiet approval, his unfinished mission finally tipping toward justice. 2 days later, the call came. They found my ex-husband's car at the base of a ravine to count his away. The gas can was still inside. So was he. Seatbelt fastened. No skid marks. No sign of braking. The coroner said it looked deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. There's a strange silence when a monster dies, like a curse lifting, but too slowly to notice. Holbrook came by with a folder. "Case closed," he said, laying it on the table. "Officially, it's ruled an accident, but we both know better." I nodded. "So Ruth can rest now. And Sam," he said. "And maybe you too." "Maybe," I said. That night, I finally went back to the forbidden room, the one with Ruth's photos. Only this time, I brought a box of matches, not to burn it in anger, but to light a single candle. I set it in the center of the room, its flame trembling like a heartbeat. "For you, Ruth," I whispered, "for being silenced, for being replaced, for being found." Then I turned to the ashes in the urn. "And for you, Sam. You couldn't finish it, but I did." The candle flickered, the light catching my reflection in one of Ruth's photos. For a moment, our faces overlapped, two women joined by betrayal, loss, and a strange kind of love. I smiled. "You know," I said softly, "you and I could have been friends." The flame steadied, as if it agreed. The next morning, I did something no one expected. I packed away the photographs, not to hide them, but to free them. Each one in a sleeve, labeled, stored in a chest that would one day tell the story the papers never did. Then I called my daughters. When the eldest answered, her voice was wary. "Mom?" "Yes," I said. "It's me. We heard about him." "I know. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free." There was silence. Then she whispered, "Can we come see you?" I hesitated, then said, "You can come by, But don't expect the same woman you left. She laughed, small and hopeful. We wouldn't dare. That weekend, they came to women, older now, softened by life. They hugged me longer than I expected. We drank coffee on the porch, where the burn marks still showed faintly on the wood. When they asked about the inheritance, I didn't flinch. Sam left it to me, I said, and I earned it. Every penny, every scar. I'm not sharing it, but I'll tell you something better. They waited. I'll teach you how to survive what life throws at you. How to walk away with your dignity intact and your sense of humor sharper than your fear. My younger daughter smiled. You sound like Grandma. I sound like myself, I said. Took me 65 years to meet her. That night, after they'd gone, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and stood by the window. The moon was high, the river calm. My reflection stared back wrinkled, wise, and alive. I whispered, "You did it, Chris." And somewhere between the silence and the hum of the city, I swear I heard Sam's voice, low and content. We did. I raised my glass to the air. To endings, I said, and to women who don't wait for permission to have them. The wind answered softly, brushing through the open window, carrying with it the faintest scent of salt and lavender. Ruth's perfume, or maybe mine. Either way, it smelled like freedom. The morning after my daughter's visit, I woke to the smell of sunlight, one of those crisp New York mornings where the sky is a clean blue and the city hasn't yet remembered its bad habits. I brewed my coffee, black and brave, and stepped onto the porch barefoot. The air was sharp, the river glittering like it had forgiven me for all the secrets spilled into it. I took a long sip and said out loud, "Well, Sam, I suppose this is what peace looks like, boring." But the truth is, peace wasn't boring. It was terrifying. I had lived half a century in reacting to lies, betrayals, bruises too small to show but too deep to forget. The quiet felt foreign, like a stranger's house I'd been told to make myself at home in. So I did what I always do when the world feels too still. I made something. I went into the studio, my kingdom of fabric, thread, and stories. The table was cluttered with unfinished projects, a silk blouse, a half-cut jacket, the bones of a dress that had waited patiently through my unraveling. I pushed everything aside and unrolled a new bolt of fabric, ivory satin, the same kind I used to make for brides who still believed in the myth of forever. But this one wasn't for a bride. It was for me. I drafted the pattern by memory, my hands remembering the geometry of love and betrayal. Each seam, each pleat was a story. I stitched silence where once there was shouting. I basted resilience into the lining. I hemmed the edge with forgiveness, not for him, not for any of them, but for myself. It took 3 days. When I was done, the dress stood on the mannequin like a declaration. Not white, not pure, just honest. I named it Rebirth. I invited Angela over to see it. She walked around the mannequin, wine glass in hand, squinting like a critic. "Looks like something a goddess would wear to her own trial," she said. "That's the idea," I said, smiling. "Where are you going to wear it?" "Nowhere," I said. "Everywhere." That afternoon, the mail arrived, a thick envelope stamped with the insignia of the NIPT. Inside was a letter from Holbrook. Case reopened. Preliminary findings confirm Markey's involvement. Confession tape and corroborating evidence deemed sufficient for posthumous charges. Ruth Caldwell officially listed as a closed homicide. Thank you for your courage, Dha. I set the letter down and stared out the window. Ruth Caldwell. Her name had been a ghost on every page of Sam's notebooks, every wall of that room. And now it was free, like a spell broken. "Rest, sweetheart," I whispered. "Your story's been told," and for the first time in years, I felt the house exhale. Later that week, I went to the crematorium. The clerk recognized me immediately, same lemon cleaner smell, same polite pity. "You're here for Mr. Rutherford?" she asked. "Yes," I said, finally. She handed me a small mahogany box. It was lighter than I expected. Strange how a man who'd weighed down my whole life could fit into something smaller than a bread loaf. I carried the ashes to the river, the same bench where I'd met Hannah, where Sam had proposed, where I'd made every decision worth remembering. I sat, set the box beside me, and took a deep breath. "You and Ruth," I said, "you can stop haunting me now. You've had enough screen time." The wind picked up, teasing the edge of my scarf. "I forgive you, Sam," I said finally, "for loving a ghost through me, and for giving me the courage to stop being one myself." Then I opened the box and let the ashes go. They scattered, soft and silver, over the river that had been our witness. For a moment, they hung in the air, then disappeared into the light. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like punctuation. When I got home, my daughters were waiting on the porch, their faces tentative but warmer than before. "We brought lunch," the elder said, holding up a bag from my favorite deli. "Bribery?" I asked. "Reconciliation," said the younger. "Or an audition?" We sat at the kitchen table, passing sandwiches, talking about small things, recipes, work, the weather. Then, somewhere between the second bite and the third, my eldest said, "Mom, we were wrong." I looked up. "When you left Dad," she said, "we thought you were destroying the family. But he was already doing that long before. We just didn't want to see it." I took her hand. I didn't want to see it either. But pretending not to is its own kind of blindness. She squeezed my fingers. "We're proud of you." That one hit me harder than any confession. "Good," I said, blinking fast. "Because I've decided I'm not done." "Not done with what?" the younger asked. "With living, with making, with loving." They smiled, maybe not fully understanding. But that was fine. I'd spent my life trying to explain myself to people who didn't want to listen. Now, I only explained myself to the mirror, and I were finally on speaking terms. That night, I hosted dinner for the first time in years. Angela came, my daughters came, even Holbrook dropped by after shift. The table was full, laughter, wine, a kind of noisy joy I'd forgotten belonged to me. At one point, Angela raised her glass. "To Chris," she said, "who turned survival into an art form and revenge into a love story." I laughed. "I'll take that. But make no mistake, love stories are better when you're the one writing them." After they left, I went into the studio one last time. The dress still stood there, waiting. I slipped it on, the fabric hugging me like an old friend. It fit perfectly, no pulling, no compromise. I turned to the mirror. 65. Gray hair in defiance of the world. Laugh lines deep as stories, eyes that had seen men fall from pedestals and still believed in mornings. I raised my chin. "You're not a survivor," I told the reflection. "You're a sequel." Then I walked onto the porch, barefoot again, the hem of my dress catching the moonlight. The river murmured below, endless and forgiving. I looked at the stars and whispered, "Thank you for the heartbreaks, the mistakes, the lessons, and the second chances. I'll take it from here." The wind shifted soft, approving. Somewhere, maybe, Ruth was laughing. Maybe Sam too. And me? I was alive, finally. Not someone's wife. Not someone's ghost. Not someone's mother pleading for permission to be happy. Just Chris from New York City, 65, widowed, wild, and gloriously free. I lifted my glass one last time. To no one and to everyone. To love, I said. To loss. And to every woman who ever mistook endurance for weakness. May we all learn to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. Then I drank to that truth, slow, proud, and unafraid, because I'd earned every drop of it.